Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BioHub, where we talk to some of the top minds in biotech. Our guest today has 20 years of experience spanning science, Wall Street, and biotech. His expertise covers small molecules, biologics, and cell and gene therapy. He was employee number one and co-CEO of Treadwell Therapeutics and orchestrated the company's incredible journey out of stealth mode in 2020. Under his leadership, Treadwell raised an impressive $118 million, advanced 3 assets into the clinic, and expanded the team to over 50 members. I'm very glad to welcome Dr. Michael Tusche. How are you, Michael?
I'm great, Max. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Let's jump straight in. So, first question, can you share a bit about your background and the journey that led you to the biotech industry and ultimately to Treadwell Therapeutics?
Sure. It's somewhat circuitous, and it certainly, the destination wasn't what I set out for when I stepped onto the path. But essentially, I was a scientist by training, PhD in immunology, and I thought in my youth that I would go to medical school. That was kind of what I was gearing up towards. But then I managed, out of college, I managed to secure a role at biopharmaceuticals in Japan, actually. And that kind of refocused kind of what I wanted to do. I wanted to get in the kind of the drug development business. So because of that experience, I went back to school. I did a PhD. And then throughout that experience, then my kind of interest shifted more to kind of the finance or investment side of things. So I did an MBA, and both my PhD and MBA were I did those at the University of Toronto in Canada. So after I finished my MBA, which I actually started shortly before I finished my PhD, I managed to secure a role at an investment bank where I was an equity analyst. So that kind of opened my eyes to kind of the financial world of biotech and kind of how Wall Street works. So that was an eye-opening experience. But shortly after landing that role, I realized that I kind of wanted to be an investor. So I moved to the buy side, where I was a hedge fund manager at a small boutique, life science only, long short equity only healthcare hedge fund, which was an amazing experience. It basically kind of showed me a lot of things about how the biotech sector works, just in terms of like how management teams should operate, how they should message externally to investors and strategics, what's successful as it relates to clinical development campaigns, what's the kind of the hot areas of biotech. So it really kind of, for me, it kind of set the groundwork for being an operator in the biotech space, because you get a very broad view of what's going on in the space. Yeah. So I made the decision, along with some of my dear friends and colleagues at the hedge fund, that we were going to kind of become operators, right? The joke that we always told internally was that, like, as investors, you're kind of pitch side, cheering on the teams. We wanted to step onto the field of play and actually be involved in drug development. So we started a small company called Near Some Laboratories, which we, in a very kind of cost-effective and efficient way, we invented and developed a couple of small molecule drug candidates for opioid use disorder, and somehow managed to convince the NIH to fund the operation. So those molecules are now in the clinic, and they're actually doing very, very well, actually exceeding our expectations. So at that stage, kind of what I wanted to do was kind of further my career and play a kind of a role in kind of innovative biotech and innovative drug targets, right? So that's kind of what led me to Treadwell. And I knew a lot of the key players involved in Treadwell, including the preeminent scientific co-founder, Dr. Tak Mak, who was my PhD supervisor and is an immunologist and cancer biologist of some repute. Discovered the T cell receptor, amongst other things. So eventually, in discussion with Dr. Mack and Dr. Bray, another one of the co-founders and chief scientific officer of the company, I came back to join Treadwell officially in January of 2020, when we were basically just a concept and a couple of drugs that we brought in from an academic institution in Canada that the team at Treadwell actually worked on previously. So we came out of stealth mode in 2020 at JP Morgan. And then, of course, 3 months later, the world took a hard left-hand turn. But nonetheless, we managed through it, and we're actually pretty proud of how we managed through it. We're able to kind of build the team, build proof of concept in three clinical studies. We brought in a couple of preclinical assets, some of which were developed by Dr. Bray and team at a previous organization, and then we brought in a cell therapy platform. So it became this situation where it was this kind of multimodality, multi-platform kind of company, right? And was at Treadwell for about 4 years, up until very recently when I stepped down to pursue other endeavors. But it was a very positive experience and a very interesting experience, and we're able to, most importantly, we're able to help patients, right? The drugs are effective in very challenging patient populations, including high risk leukemia and ER positive breast cancer. So yeah, it was for me, it's been kind of a circuitous route, but I think eventually what I really wanted to, if I look back 20 years and I asked my 20 years younger self what I wanted to do, it's essentially lead an innovative biotech company, and I feel very grateful that I was able to do that.
Yeah, because not many people have that clear head when they're younger as well. That's what they wanted to do.
Wasn't so clear.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, right, fair enough. Yeah, I always say, I always wanted to grow up and be a recruiter. So,
I wanted to be a baseball player. How did that go?
Yeah. Yeah. So the next question. So leading a biotech company, it requires a unique set of skills and experiences. How did your previous professional experience prepare you for the role of CEO?
I think it was Michael Gilman, who's a very prominent biotech entrepreneur, also Canadian like myself. He said that as a CEO, your experience, your knowledge is a mile wide and an inch deep, right? So I think to be a senior leader at a biotech company, I think you need to have experience in a lot of different aspects of drug development and company formation and company building in the biotech space. So I wouldn't say that there's any one role that it has impacted me more than others. If I were to do that, I would probably say my experience as an investor, because I think in being an investor, I think you really understand kind of what investors are looking for and how to message a story, and what to say and what not to say in order to be viewed as credible by investors. And that's something that we strive to be, is kind of under promise and over deliver. So I would say that experience was probably the most helpful. But that all being said, I mean, my experience at my last company at Nearsome, where it was essentially two guys in front of a whiteboard thinking, what are we going to do, right? And how are we going to do it? I think kind of understanding the early stage drug development process is important as well, right? Because as a leader in biotech, I think what's most important, my view is to be a leader, you're essentially serving the people that work for you, right? You hire people that are smarter than you, that help you kind of achieve the vision that you set out for yourself, right? So I think kind of understanding not only kind of the finance side of things and the investment side of things, but also kind of the research side of things is really important. And I think understanding clinical development is something that I kind of gleaned from my experience as an investor, but it really kind of ramped up at Treadwell, because we were without kind of clinical leadership for a long time, right, in the absence of a CMO. So I kind of oversaw that until we brought in a very excellent CMO, Dr. Roger Sidhu, who's now the acting CEO of Treadwell Therapeutics. So yeah, I mean, I think having experience as an investor and an early company builder was probably the most impactful in my path to this seat.
Yeah, I think that leads us nicely onto the next question. And especially, in the last year or so, it's been that little bit harder for biotechs in terms of funding and regulatory hurdles. How did you navigate these challenges, and what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs in the biotech sector?
I mean, I think you have to think broadly, right? You have to think outside the box, right? I mean, I think there's capital in various forms that you can access, like grants, that we accessed at Treadwell. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, what you really need to do is and my advice to kind of aspiring entrepreneurs is you really need to surround yourself with really good people, right? I mean, that's the most important thing, right? Because no one person can know everything and have all the experience and the myriad of different functionalities that are required for a biotech company to be successful.
Yeah.
So
I
I
mean,
think
that's a great advert for us as well, Avetix, talking about
well,
the people and how important they are.
I mean, Max, we've talked about this several times. I mean, for me, the three most important things in biotech are team, team, and team, right? Not necessarily in that order, right? So I think,
Yeah,
and this is a business of people, right? I mean, you can have the best drug in the history of mankind, but if you don't have the right people to
I agree.
execute and to bring it to the place where it needs to be, you have absolutely nothing, right? So I mean, I think it's really about it's really about having a clear-eyed focus on what you want to do. Be flexible, right? If something doesn't work, kind of course correct, but also really, have great people around you, right? One piece of advice that someone gave me a long time ago was keep your friends close and your mentors closer, right? I think people that are impactful on your career, I think, I've tried to stay close to
Yeah,
people who have mentored me over the years, including people that mentored me 20 years ago, right? And I think it's important to have a cadre of people around you that can support you, because it ain't easy, right? I mean, I think I heard someone say something recently. It's just like there is no more challenging human endeavor than developing drugs, right? You can have tens of billions of dollars and you can build rockets to Mars, but you can have tens of billions of dollars and it doesn't mean that you're going to have a safe and efficacious drug for Alzheimer's disease, right? It's very,
yeah,
very challenging. So I think you need great people around you, is I think something that's really important.
yeah. Completely agree with that. Really agree. So, given your experience in the industry, what market trends do you foresee shaping the future of biotech?
One thing that I'm thinking about recently is AI,
Okay.
right? Like I think I'm how can I describe this? I'm a bit of a traditionalist as it relates to biotech, right? It's just like, people talk about all this fancy new technology, but really it's the tried and true methods to develop drugs that can be impactful for patients, right? That all being said, I have been very close to kind of novel new kind of therapeutic modalities over my career, like cell and gene therapy, as you mentioned earlier. But I'm really keeping an eye on AI, right? I mean, I think AI, machine learning, can really, really, I'm a bit of a neophyte in the space, but like I think it has the chance to really streamline and make more efficient the drug development process,
Hmm.
and that's from very, very early stage discovery. Right, there's really, really exciting technologies like DNA encoded libraries that can allow for really rapid kind of identification of leads, right? That can shave off months to years off the drug development process. But once those candidates get in the clinic, I'm starting to think a little bit more about how AI can really help clinical development, right? It can help with protocol writing. It can help with kind of clinical study reports and all this sort of stuff, and finding the right sort of patients for your study. So to me, I think AI, it's changing the way that we work in a lot of different spaces, right? And I think it will certainly change biotech. So that's one. Another, of course, is genetic medicine, right? And
Hmm.
I would include, and that, to me, that's a broad bucket, right? Like cell therapy is essentially gene therapy, right? When you think about CAR and transgenic TCR, that's genetic therapy, right? And I think as we improve as it relates to delivery access to these medicines, I think these are going to continue to change the way we think about treating patients. I mean, I remember when the first CAR T therapy got approved, right? People are like, well, how are people going to access this? Like, how is this going to do from a commercial standpoint? It turns out
Yeah,
it's doing very well, right? And it's going to continue to do well when we find kind of easier ways to administer these therapies and administer the therapies to a broader array of people, right? So I think the cell and gene therapies are going to continue to improve as we move forward here, and of course with the recent approval of the first CRISPR product for sickle cell disease. I mean, I think this is just the first step. I think there's going to be more of these going forward.
that's so exciting. That's actually really exciting. Um, so, I mean, moving across a little bit more to your mindset. I mean, leading a biotech company can be incredibly demanding.
Yep.
How do you maintain a resilient mindset and navigate the pressure that comes with running a company in the biotech sector?
Yeah, look, it's hard, right? It's not an easy business. Look, if you're successful 10% of the time, that's huge, right? That batting average is not anything to brag about, but that's just the nature of this business. It's most drugs will fail. That's because as a wise man once told me, biology always wins, right? And basically, what are we trying to do in this business? Is we're trying to impinge on biology, which is not easy, right? It's highly variable. So I think you just have to maintain this sort of state of equanimity, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, and this is, people ask for my advice about like, how do you approach this work? And I think it's like, you just have to be very stable, right? It's just, and don't take things personally and don't take failures personally, right? Because it's like nothing is good or bad. It's just a situation by which you can learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think maintaining that kind of equanimity, it's hard, right? Because in this business, most people are kind of type A, very motivated to get the job done, and we take things very personally. I certainly have in the past, but I think the most important thing is just maintain this stability, right? If something bad happens, it's just like, okay, what can we learn from this, and how can we make sure that this doesn't happen in the future? I think is the most important thing, and it's hard to get to that place. But I just say having this kind of equanimity of mind, I think is very important, because you will fail. that's just a truism in this business, and it's just how do you deal with that, right?
Yeah.
How do you get back up and continue to move forward and continue to improve and build value? I think it starts while having a kind of a baseline of just like, this happened. I'm just going to learn from it and move on.
Yeah. I mean, who is it that puts the pressure on you first? Is it board members, investors, or is it yourself, or the people around you?
I think it has to be, if you're in this position, it has to be yourself, right? If a board member is putting more pressure on you than you put on yourself, I think that's a problem, right? I think, and that's how I think about things, right? Yeah, okay, you're going to have board members that are pressuring you, rightly or wrongly. But I think it has to come from yourself, right? And you have to have expectations. And I think it's a truism in this business is sometimes your expectations are different than your board's expectations, right? But I think the pressure needs to come from within. I think it certainly does with me.
I think as well, like in biotech, all your goals, commercializing that drug is so looks so far in the future, potentially makes it that little bit harder, and those small term goals, have to mean so much more.
Yeah, but I also think too, you need to have. I think what helps here is that you need to have a view, not just like a year, 2 years down the road, but 5 years down the road.
Yeah.
Right. I think, and that also helps when you're conveying a value proposition to investors. You look reasonable and rational if you're thinking about, okay, this is the market that we're developing this drug in, right? And this is why, and this is the commercial upside if we develop a drug in this market, right? So I think you need to have that long view, right? Because that's the people that you're talking to that are investing in your company will definitely, or at least they should have that long view, right? They should have a view of future cash flow discounted to today, right? So I think you need to understand that. You need to understand those timelines, and you need to think 5 years down the road.
Yeah. I mean, how much do you set that in stone then? Is it we're going to go the whole way through and commercialize, or we're going to look to sell in this many years' time, or, is it that clear cut?
I think a fault that some people have is that, like, they're basically putting the for sale sign up very early, right? I mean, I think the goal should be to build a stable business, right?
Yeah.
To build a business that has stable cash flows. And it's not necessarily realistic in this business, because most companies that become commercial don't do it particularly well. So I mean, I think it's you have to. As senior leaders of any company, we have a fiduciary duty to maximize shareholder value. That's the cold hard facts, right? And that's kind of, our guiding light should be patience and providing
Yeah.
hope for patients and something that can help them, right? And there's nothing more valuable and there's nothing more rewarding than coming to the realization that you're helping patients. But at the end of the day, you have to think about shareholders, right? So whether that be taking a drug to the commercial and building a sales force, which again for most small companies is not reasonable. The focus at Treadwell was leukemia, right? And leukemia is an indication where, these patients are not treated at too many centers, at least in the U.S., and it's probably true in other jurisdictions as well. So you can detail that sort of commercial effort, but generally speaking, you wouldn't want to. It's the purview of large organizations, but I feel like you have to have that in mind, right?
Yeah.
You have to be like, we're building a company here, right? We're building a stable company, right? You can't just build something for sale, because that's a fool's errand, because big pharma will come when they come and not a moment sooner. Right? So I think you have to prepare for internal success and not prepare for an acquisition, because that may come or it may not.
Yeah.
Like I remember CEOs when I was an investor who shall remain nameless were talking about selling their company 10 years ago. And are those
Yeah.
companies sold? No, they're not. They're still
I mean,
independent companies. So you can never predict when that's going to happen.
yeah. I mean, I talk to CEOs and they say they're going to sell in so many years to me. So, most of the time they're, it's not a fact they're trying to hide, and I suppose that's fine.
And usually the message that I convey externally is we will do whatever, and it's a bit formulaic and robotic, but it's accurate. It's like we will do whatever is in the best interest of shareholders.
Yeah.
Whether that means licensing a program, selling the company, or building out kind of infrastructure to be a commercial entity, right? It's like all those things are on the table, and whatever's right. I mean, maybe an acquirer will come in and the price will be way too low, right? And you'll be like, no, that's destroying